Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health on the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I am Todd Rennebaum, and yes, the Saskatchewan Podcast Network is a network of all types of very lovely podcasts that you can listen to that are made right here in the province. Things from comedy to football to golf to whatever you can think of, it's on there. Check it out and support some other local podcasts. So in this episode, this week, we are going to listen to part 2 of my conversation with Erin Goodpipe. And to refresh your memory, she is a young, lovely Indigenous lady who is speaking to me about intergenerational trauma within the Indigenous community and even more specific within her own family. But before I do that, I'd like to thank so many people this week. I don't have too many specific names other than Krista Lee Frost. I'm not exactly sure how to say her last name, but she is the creator of More Joy Challenge. That is a Facebook page. You can join that. It's a mental health group, and it's all about challenging yourself to have more joy in your life. She's also a freelance writer, and she wrote a very nice article about me and my kids' book, Sometimes Daddy Cries, for the Western Producer. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for all the wonderful shares and comments and all the wonderful things because of that article from people. So thank you. I'd also like to thank Annabelle. She is the wonderful lady that runs Penny University Bookstore in Regina. It's 3104 13th Avenue, or you can call 639-571-2186, or you can go on her website, pennyu.ca, and you can order books online right there. So thank you, Annabelle, for your sponsorship for the show. All right, so let's get down to it. This is Erin Goodpipe. She's the host of the show The Other Side on APTN. She's a playwright, producer, and the performer of Making Treaty 4. Again, a beautiful, wonderful play that I got to be a part of. Not acting, but I built the set. Anyway, I was still a part of it, and I was still very proud to be a part of it. But anyway, without further ado, I give you Erin Goodpipe. Do you blame intergenerational trauma for what happened to your mother and how, I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but
yeah, it's like a yes or a no. I mean, it's yes and no. I can't ignore what happened to my mom, and there are specific reasons for that. If this happened prior to, if my mom was transported to another time hundreds of years ago, could I say she would have died the same way? No, absolutely not. There's a really good chance that's not, she probably would have been healthy. I have that idea in my head, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that. And there are some really intense things that my mom had gone through. I asked her once when I was like 12 years old, why are you prostituting? Because I couldn't understand it. I said, why are you doing that? Why don't you just go and get a job? That's what my 12-year-old, bluntness said to my mom. And, she said to me, as an Indian, no one's going to hire me. That's what my mom said. And I didn't understand that. I didn't quite understand that. And as I went through some of the systems myself, I began to understand, my mom is carrying internalized racism, because she isn't, she didn't graduate high school because she was, living on her own, essentially. And, didn't have parents, was carrying her own grief about not having family and not having her own parents around, and was going through the ringer with a bunch of other things. And then it just sort of snowballs. I mean, as you know, right? Like it just sort of becomes a snowball effect with the pain that you're carrying, the trauma that you're carrying, and then not addressing it, not having the supports, right? My mom it's not like she was raised with a bunch of family that was, willing to take her in or help her or love her, right? And it just sort of snowballs, right? And then my mom is, getting herself into situations that are really, quite difficult. So she didn't graduate high school, and then not being supported socioeconomically, those things matter, and I think about those like deeply and immensely, and that's helped me with that understanding for my mom. But also, I say yes and no because we also have a choice. Is hard,
right.
Hard as that reality is, like, oh, that's such a hard reality, but we also have a choice. And I want to make that space for my mom and my dad and my family. I want to hold that space for them where I understand, and then there's this other part where, healing is, it's what happened to us. It was unfair for any person who experiences trauma. It's always unfair, and we grapple with that. Like, this is just so unfair, right? And we have to learn to like address that and overcome it, or work with it. But at the end of the day, healing is always our responsibility. And isn't that it? It's like, that's the unfairness of it, right? Is that healing is always our responsibility as individuals. It's why does this exist in the world, right? It truly is. But, that's helped me. It's my responsibility to do that healing. And because nobody can be me, nobody can, step inside my body and fix those things for me. I'm the one that has to do that,
Oh, God. I remember seeing doctors about my mental health issues and like, well, it's their fault. They didn't fix me.
Yeah. Like, and that's tough, right? Yeah. It's just like, oh, it's so hard. I've been so pissed off, at certain times in my life where it's like, oh, why do I gotta go through this? Or why is this so hard? Or you compare sometimes to other people's lives and you're like, that's just so unfair. Damn, it is. But, it is, it's our responsibility. So, I also have to think about that reality too. With, intergenerational trauma is that, we do have a choice. And that choice is really powerful. If you truly ruminate on it and think about it and think about the impacts, that's what keeps me going, I think, in my own healing. And I think I probably can say this on behalf of all Indigenous people, is that I think we keep going because there is this hope, and not just a hope, but we know that at some point our actions will create a better situation for the generations to come. I truly do believe that. And so we need to know the weight and the reality of making those choices. And the choice to heal is always a good one, even if it is hard. And even if you think you're not getting somewhere, it truly does matter, And I guess a good way of summing this up is I did a Himblecha. It's a ceremony, and it's a fasting ceremony. And without getting into too much detail about the actual ceremony, I had one of my sort of elders, like an auntie, sit with me on the hill the day before I was going to go into ceremony. And she said, somebody prayed for you to be here. Someone prayed that there would be a generation where you could be here and pray for the generations to come. And wow, I was like, I've heard that before, but for whatever reason, my heart was open and could understand. Like, it wasn't just head knowledge, it was heart knowledge in that moment. And I truly could feel that, that I was connected to my ancestors, and the fact that I know someone prayed for this, I absolutely know it. And here I was going to go in and pray for the generations to come. And I was like, that's such a beautiful opportunity. Why wouldn't I choose that, and it's going to go somewhere, even if I don't see it in my lifetime.
Right. I mean, my family had trauma too. Like, my grandpa went to World War II and all this stuff. But the big difference is, like, it's kind of like chronic pain and acute pain. There was this major world event that happened that lasted 4 or 5 years, and there was trauma. But this is like, what is it, over 200 years of trauma for Indigenous people. So it takes that much longer to heal, and it takes that much longer for the generational trauma to, I don't know if it's dissipate or what it is, to the point that that generation can then heal for everybody. So I think we're living in a pretty amazing time, because I think it's slowly, of course, happening, but just the way that, like, even these recent grave sites and unmarked graves and mass graves that they're finding, it's like, when even 30 years ago when I was a teenager, people weren't ready to hear it yet and to heal from it. I think it would have just been swept under the carpet still or something. I don't know what would happen, but it's, in a way, I don't like saying proud, but it's nice to see that people everywhere, not just Indigenous people, are kind of realizing and wanting to heal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even as the abuser, you want to heal, or whatever, know what I mean? I'm not the abuser, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting time, like, people are calling it sort of a reckoning. And for whatever reason, we have the elements in place where people are listening, and, or we're being loud enough that we're being heard, or we have the tools to be heard and to shake up things. It's probably a mix of those things, because, I mean, this is not new for Indigenous people, right? And you've probably heard this, but many of us grew up with these stories. I grew up where we knew about these unmarked graves. We've heard the stories of children, being murdered, essentially. We all know this as Indigenous people in all of our communities. You just have to speak to some elders, or not even elders, but, those who are a little bit older in your family have those stories. And so, it's also documented too in all of the commissions. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples documents those oral histories. So does the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. That documents it. They're all in there, so that's been, this knowledge has actually been out for quite a long time, both in our families and also recorded for the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? So for whatever reason, this is the time, and, we can debate what that, why that's happening. But I think it is good. It dredges up a lot for people. And I think for me as an Indigenous person, it can be very triggering, very activating of that trauma. And I had to be really careful in deciding my ethics for approaching everything that's out there right now, as far as talking about these subjects, right? I think that has to happen with your own healing too, right? Because we can't just flip a switch and then, I'm healed. It's, things are triggering, and it becomes sometimes a slower process with yourself to be able to have the capacity to take on certain things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know that as well. It's I don't know, like, for example, when my mother passed away, one of the things that I prayed about actually was that I could handle this, because I just grew up, in my family where so many people died, by the time I was like 10, I'd gone to so many different funerals, and I'd seen people die, and, that's really tough to grow up with. And I think, you sort of have these realities in your mind. Like, I knew my mom was going to die probably when I was like, I knew that she was going to die at a young age, because so many of my relatives die of either liver failure, overdose, murder, or some other tragedy. It's usually, I can name almost how my older relatives were going to, die. And that's exactly what happened to basically my mother's whole generation, because there was her, and then she had her two brothers, and they all died of those things, essentially. And so when my mom died, I had seen so much of my family grieving all of the time, and dealing with that grief in really unhealthy ways, through substance abuse and alcohol and all of those sort of unhealthy things. And so when my mom died, I actually prayed. I prayed that, please, Creator, help me through this so that I don't lose myself, Please help me, have the capacity to hold this, to carry this. to heal at the right times, or, you know, however I'm supposed to heal, that's not going to be just so life altering for me. And mind you, it is always life altering when you lose someone like that. But what I'm saying is, like, so much so that I don't want to go off into the deep end, right? I didn't know what that was going to be like, but I was raised where grief was just so intense for people, and I just didn't want to be that. And so, you know, like, with this, I'm acutely aware, you know, when the stuff with the children, you know, being found, I'm always aware of, you know, how, you know, what are my limits here, and how can I know those limits? Because even when I go on social media, like, I read about, you know, people are sharing their histories, their stories, which is good. You know, it's not like it's bad. We're sort of standing in solidarity when we do that, you know, and people are healing in that process of sharing as well, you know. But we have to be aware sometimes when we put that stuff out there that it is just like, it's highly triggering for people, and you don't mean to read it sometimes, but it's like, oh, it's there, and you want to read it, and then it sits with you, and you can't always predict necessarily how that's going to feel and sit inside of you. And so I've had to have, you know, my own barriers with that, and boundaries, and, you know, also ruminating on how can I release this tension from myself? You know, what's the best way for me to heal through this, and to digest this, and to be a part of it at the same time, you know? Like, it's such a weird, like, okay, I want to be a part of it, but I also need to have boundaries, right? And sort of how do I oscillate between that? I don't know. I was thinking about how that must be for, other people going through this type of news.
Well, yeah. I mean, I to be honest with you, I was concerned about you being triggered just doing the interview, because it's happened in past guests talk about their trauma. Talk about mental health and stuff, and sometimes, you know, a day later they'll message me and be like, man, you know, I still feel like shit. Sorry, like, but it's also part of the healing process in a way, but like you said, it's a very fine balance of, you know, pushing your boundaries to accept the triggers and heal from them, but not to get overwhelmed with them either. So I'm hoping this conversation isn't.
No, I totally thought about that, you know, when you asked me, Todd, and I felt that I was in a good place to be able to talk about it. And also the form matters, you know, like, know, we're sort of on Zoom and stuff, and I'm able to be at home and have things that are comfortable for me. There's sort of a different element sometimes if it's in person. Sometimes it's better when it's in person. So just thinking about those different forms and the ways that we share, that matters. And also the relationship and the intent. Because there's definitely some people who, you know, I'm acutely aware that there's some people who are sort of riding the trend and want to sort of capitalize on that, or virtue signal sometimes. And I want people who are authentic, you know, who care about mental health, want to make a difference, and I mean a difference in a way that has substance, that's not just sort of a surface level. Let's just talk about it and then not make it into anything. And so I respect that you have a platform and you're doing this work, and I think it's absolutely necessary. So I felt really safe.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I felt really safe. Good. Yeah.
But plus I'm cute. So.
Yes, and then also I know you too, right? Like, I know you as well. Like, we have a history, right? So it's not like you're like some random person, because I've had that, and I've turned down people who are random, right? Because I'm like, I don't know where you come from, so I don't know your intentions.
Yeah. I'm having trouble with the whole thing being Caucasian. It's like, because I do see a lot of people wearing orange shirts.
Yeah.
But I also know, like you said, like, I don't want to come off like I'm virtue signaling, or I'm like, you know, it's this trend. And because even the Black Lives Matter thing, I put my Facebook profile as black, then I took it down because I was like, I don't know, like, I don't know, it's not, I don't know, it's weird because it's like, it's not my trauma, but I want to support it, and I don't know how to do that, and I don't want to look like an idiot, but I also don't want to look in, you know, like I'm not wanting to, you know.
Yeah, no, I completely hear that, because even, with stuff that was going on with Black Lives, and, you know, I didn't know what to do, because I put up the square and then I took it down because I was like, I don't even know how to feel. And I'm an Indigenous person, right? Different experiences for sure. And but also similarity. So I was like, oh, do I have a right? I constantly question, do I have a right? And, one thing I've taken to as well is actually having like real authentic relationships with people, because social media especially can be very performative. And I try not to judge people based on what I see on there, because it's so easy to get caught up in, oh, did that person say the right thing? Or are they, maybe they should have shared this, or maybe that, and I try to have like some compassion and humanity, that we're all sort of trying to figure it out.
Man, I just had the same conversation with someone the other day.
Yeah, right?
Because it's like, you're not sitting down having a half-hour conversation with them. You're just looking at one sentence they posted.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, even I mess up on things, right? So people are really quick to attack people. And I think the best thing is always to like seek out a true and authentic in-person relationship with people, and to see their works like in real life. Because there's people that I know, like, for example, there's like elders that I know, they're not on Facebook, but they're doing so much work for our communities, and they're not on Facebooks talking about it, or, Instagrams or whatever, which I'm not demonizing that for sure. Cause I think social media is powerful tool right now. And all the digital resources we have are so powerful. But what I'm saying is that there's also people who aren't on those things and deserve to have that recognition, because they are doing so much work. So long story, my point is to say that, we need to like totally have some compassion and not judge people just based off of what we see in a digital realm.
So as a Caucasian man who's, well, no, I'm not Catholic, so I'm not, completely, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but anyway.
It's all good.
How would you like me to support you
in
intergenerational trauma, or, just in general, I guess?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think the biggest thing is, seeing each other as human beings and as family. I've worked on like projects where there's like millions of dollars, like research and stuff. And sometimes I get annoyed and frustrated because we spend so much money just verifying the fact that, what we really just need to go back to is our basic humanity, like treating each other with respect, and, going over to somebody's house, or even just making food for somebody, like those are like simple yet highly important gestures that we can do for one another. And I always go back to that, like, just creating relationships with people, supporting people through love and generosity.
Making connections.
Absolutely. That's, right. I think that's where healing is really gonna take off, is when you have people who can support you and love you through not just difficult times, but in all times. And I think in these situations, there's some very specific things, of course, that need to happen for justice to happen, right?
Right.
Things like, doing the petitions and going up and showing up. And, we do need white or Caucasian, non-Indigenous voices and bodies to stand up for us, because this is a lot that we're carrying. And so we need, non-Indigenous people to be that, on the front line and shake up the system that they're a part of, and that, is upheld. But it's upheld by all of us, right? And so that burden needs to be sort of lightened, because, an Indigenous issue is not just for Indigenous people. An Indigenous issue is it concerns all of us. And that's the Beautiful. Family dynamic. When you think about family, it's like, if my brother is going through something, it's not just his issue, it's all of our issue. I love my brother, and out of that love and that relationship, then it's all of our issue. And so I think we just need to go back to that kinship, that family way of being. It's so important.
I did an interview with Tristan DeRocher. Did you listen to it?
I listened to part of it. I was driving and then I had to stop. But yes, it was so good.
Okay.
Yeah, and he mentioned how I still can't believe this. Like, it just boggles my mind. Someone came up to him and said, well, I think you should be protesting for all mental health issues, not just Indigenous. And he's like, well, I am. It's all the same thing. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Exactly. Right. If no, truly, I believe that. It's like, if, as Indigenous people, we want to support all peoples. And I think, part of the injustice is thinking about land, right? A lot of this comes from the land. And what I mean by that is colonialism, right? And the usurpation of our lands and our right to life. I always boil it down to that. is our right to land and life. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's not like Indigenous people want to kick everyone off the land. You know, that's not what I've ever heard from any of my respected elders or knowledge keepers in my communities. It's that, you know, we're agreeing to share the land. That's a part of our instructions from Creator, is to be generous and to support and love one another. So it's never about, hey, let me kick you off the land. It's no, but there's some really unjust things going on the land, and we made a sacred promise, you know, a covenant promise to one another, and it's not being honored. And it has devastating impacts on my people. And so part of that justice is, you know, acknowledging that, right? And saying, where is our right to land and life that was promised to us, in which our people used to have, you know, inherently since time immemorial. That's really important. And so all things, whether we're talking about the stuff that's going on with the children being found, you know, in residential schools, you know, and everything else, whether we're talking about the E60 scoop or high incarceration rates, or, you know, in the justice system, in the healthcare system, in the education system. I mean, I could keep going on. Yeah, I mean, it just keeps going on and on. But all sectors of society, and looking back over the past 100, you know, 200, 300, 400 years, it really boils down to how are we honoring our relations? And I don't feel that we've been honored. Indigenous people haven't been honored, and there's a spiritual contract that we made with one another, and we need to honor that. It needs to be honored.
Yeah, I mean, it's still happening today. Like where was in the States where they were trying to put a pipeline through land that they were promised. Like,
right?
Well, what the hell? Like, you're breaking our contract here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's such an individualist mindset, because I feel like my Indigenous worldview or philosophies truly are about, you know, the collective, right? And thinking about our relationships to one another. The health and well-being of one another matters. And not just, you know, the two-legged, but the four-legged and the six-legged and the eight-legged and the winged and the, you know, the swimmers. And, you know, we're all in a relationship together, and we all impact one another. And so when we're talking about mental health, as an Indigenous person, I always relate it back to a holistic framework, the relational framework of the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual that make up the whole as individuals, and then as a whole collective unit, right? So we have to address that. We can't not just be fragmented and expect that, okay, well, I'm going to try and be well, or I'm going to segregate myself from my families. But we also have to think about collective healing in mental health. It's huge.
Sounds like AA.
Yeah.
It does, actually. Like, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's mental.
Yeah.
And then helping new members and spreading, you know, like, it's anyway. Not to oversimplify what you said.
No. Yeah.
And something that drives me mental is I actually, the people on my Facebook and the people that I'm surrounded are very empathetic and very good people, but I still hear the occasional, oh, it happened a long time ago and it's time to get over it, or whatever.
Right.
And it's like, you know, I'm not that old, and you know, in high school, we played basketball against other schools, and they were residential schools. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's not that long ago. This wasn't 200 years ago.
Exactly.
This was 20 years ago when what was it, 1996, the last one was shut down?
Yes.
And I mean, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's huge. I think, like, I hear you. I definitely hear you, Todd. You know, because I'm very aware of that, and
I'm sure you are.
It's just like it's damaging for me. You know, when people say that, I don't know if they realize what that triggers for me, what that brings up for me, and for other people who are experiencing this. It's dehumanizing. You know, it's saying, I don't want to look at you as a human and what you have gone through, which has happened.
It's just so much easier to not get invested in it emotionally.
Absolutely, yeah. And people don't want to. It's late. To me, I feel like it's laziness. That sounds really bad, but I think the reality is people are unwilling to do so. You know, to do that deep work of deep listening, like listening to people and connecting with people, because I mean, it does take a lot of work to do that. And for some that is really difficult. And especially if you've grown up in families or communities where that's not the norm, you know, where you develop yourself holistically, so you're emotionally intelligent or available, you know, you have to connect with other people, or you have a responsibility to other people. If you don't grow up that way, it can be very hard to ask somebody, hey, listen to me as a human being, or see me as a human being, or step outside of your privilege, you know, to hear me. And I think that's a big part of it. And it's funny because, you know, I have an education degree, and I remember when I was doing my internship, and, you know, I kind of had a little bit of choice of where I would do it. And I always wanted to do it with, you know, the areas of the city or the reserves, you know, where the socioeconomic status was maybe lower, because I could relate. And I never wanted to go to the schools where, you know, this is like the more rich area or the posh area, because I'm like, you know, it's such a battle to get people to step outside of themselves and to put down their privilege, right? Because nobody wants to do that. Like that, it's hard for people to say like, oh, I'm wrong and I actually benefit from things. You know, people want to protect themselves and that privilege, and they don't see that sometimes, right? So
I think sometimes they do see it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then they get lazy. It's like, oh, that hurt. I don't like thinking about that. So,
well, and they can afford to, right? Because that doesn't impact them the same way, right? It just, and that's the reality is that, you know, for some people, you know, for us as people who suffer trauma, or for those who are suffering, you know, race politics, is that we can't avoid this. We can't turn a blind eye. We don't have those freedoms. We have to live in those realities. And it costs us our health, our well-being, and it also costs us our lives and our family members as well. And so that's the reality, right? The people, you know, with privilege, they're able to say, well, I don't have to look at that, you know? And then also benefit from that. And that's the other side of it, right? Is like, well, you're actually benefiting from the broken promises in this land, you know, and that's unfair. And so I think that's, you know, that's part of my anger and my upset sometimes, my upset emotions is that, well, you know, okay, so you have the freedom to just turn a blind eye, but you're also benefiting and upholding these systems.
Yeah. Well, I think capitalism in itself is a mental health issue for...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like access, right? Like having access to like basic needs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a huge topic.
So how did you feel seeing, well, first of all, a liberal prime minister with a conservative premier on a reserve, and signing papers to let the Cowicés to take care of their own children?
Yeah, ooh, that's a complex answer. I'm going to try and weave my way around this a little bit. Very political. I think for me,
it doesn't have to be political, but just how exciting was it to see? Because I mean, that's the first kind of anything signed like that.
Yeah, I am very excited for Cowicés. I know Cadmus, we've worked together before, and he's done some really amazing work, and him and his community are doing a lot and paving the way, and, you know, really representing us well. And, you know, I just feel really proud. I'm very, very proud of what's going on there, and signing that, you know, that agreement it's huge. I can't say enough how much we shouldn't break our families apart, and how we need to keep our communities intact, and especially our children. You know, like our children are so important to us as Indigenous people, and they are the future, literally, right? So, you know, I think about my own experiences, my mother's experiences of the abuses that have happened in foster care. You know, like, you know, my mom endured sexual abuse, I endured sexual abuse, you know, physical abuse, emotional abuse, on top of, you know, you're sort of treated like a prisoner, you know, like all of my siblings, they also went to foster care as well. And I remember that we weren't even allowed to know where they went, and they couldn't even phone us, and how upsetting that is, you know. Why are children being punished for that? You know, it's, you know, because the parents were going to punish children. That doesn't make sense to me. So that in itself is a traumatizing social structure, like quite literally. And I think the government has a responsibility for the trauma that they are causing, literally, to Indigenous people and to other peoples who are enduring these systems that don't make a lot of sense, because so many people have said this doesn't work. And, you know, you can actually save money. If you look at some of the research, you can save money by doing the things like implementing other programs and other sort of situations where you're keeping the family together. And so it's like, what is going on here? You know, why are these this way of doing it? Why is this still happening? And you have to wonder sometimes if this is just shape-shifting colonial policy.
Right. Yeah. Well, even sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that, you know, many of us believe that, you know, residential schools are not around now, but we have other systems in place that are just as well doing the same things today.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that thing about saving money, like, governments love to save money. So it makes you wonder when they choose the other option to not save money, and, like, why did you come to that decision? Like, is there an ulterior motive here, or what?
Well, that's exactly what some of us believe, you know, is that there's a hidden agenda. We call it a hidden agenda. That's why I call it shape-shifting colonial policy, because is that intent still there? If you line up the dots and you spread everything on the table and you look at it, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. So are you purposefully putting down my people? Are you purposely oppressing us? Is this still genocide, you know? I talked to
Jason McCurdy. He's the director of Prairie Harm Reduction in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And he's basically wondered the same thing. He's like, it's been proven that safe consumption sites save money. It's like you're basically giving us the responsibility to deal with this stuff. You know, you're going to save on doctors, you're going to save on ambulances, like all this money that you can save, but yet they choose not to fund safe consumption sites in Saskatchewan. So again, it makes you wonder, you know, it's like, okay, what's the real motive here?
Yeah, exactly. What is going on? And, you know, like I said, I've worked in research before, and we've said these things over and over. Like, Indigenous people are tired because we've said these things over and over and over and over, and we know that they work. We've even done research projects, and, you know, people have done the work of having to, you know, go in and prove these things, you know, and we've proven time and time again that they work. So it is a matter of that questioning and rallying and saying, what in the hell is going on here? Because this doesn't not make any sense. And, you know, your original question was asking about, seeing, what Cowsis was doing and seeing the political leaders come out. And I am so proud of Cowsis. Like I said, I want to reiterate that point. Like, absolutely, you know, it's a long time coming for our communities to have, practicing their governance, because we are nation to nation. We are not, we're not underneath the government. You know, we're supposed to be our own nations in our own territories, and that's the way that we need to be seen. And I think this move for Cowsis is really exemplifying that nation to nationness, that we are sovereign, and that we are we're autonomous, and we have agency and the powers to do those things, and we just need to, you know, enact them. So I was very proud of Cowsis in that way. As far as, you know, having the Premier and the Prime Minister come out, sometimes I wonder. I'm very skeptical. I am very skeptical of the performative gestures of those who are in politics. You know, because if you really look at it, it's like we get a lot of lip service as far as promises that are made and, you know, speeches are given. But the reality always is that you have to look at where are they willing to put their money and their funding and their time and their energy. And, you know, just looking at those things, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, there are court cases right now that the federal government is fighting against, you know, residential school survivors. Right. Why is that happening, right? So it becomes like a conundrum that you're coming out to our community, you know, and you have the audacity to say certain things, but your actions kind of look different in other situations. So, I'm very skeptical sometimes of seeing that.
Hey, I don't blame you.
Yeah, totally. Oh, man. health and wellness is so crucial to the survivance of my people, of all people. It should be at the forefront of everything, whether in education, whether in the justice system, whether in child welfare systems, social services systems, mental health, emotional health, physical health, spiritual health. They all need to be unified, and we need to begin to connect them to all sectors of society. And so intergenerational trauma, it impacts generations of people, but it also economically is costing everybody a lot of money too. And that's the practical side of things, right? It's like, if you're going to subjugate people like this and not give people the resources, you're talking about a whole generation of people who, it's going to cost money, right? Like there are links to, people having unemployment, living in poverty, suffering substance and alcohol abuse, and, the list goes on. And we rally for the government to pay for these things, but why don't you just be preventative and proactive and put in measures in place, fund things, give the spaces and resources that we know work for this preventative and proactive work to happen, so that we're not answering this after the fact, it's hugely important. And also, I could get into detail for, what I believe or what my community believes or what I've heard from the community that they believe works as far as addressing mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health. This is really important. Big topic.
If you want, I don't know how much time you have.
Yeah.
I can make this a 2-part episode because
gosh, I don't know about that. I feel like
we're an hour and 20 minutes in, and usually I'm like 40 minutes in.
So much. I'm sorry, Todd. No, let me know. Yeah, I just, I've sort of brushed on those topics already. I sort of feel like, but I
almost have enough already that we could do a 2-part.
Oh my goodness, episode. That's a lot. Sorry, I apologize if I'm.
No, this is amazing. This is exactly what I was hoping this would be.
Oh, good.
Is there anything you want to plug, like what you're doing? Are you still on APTN or anything like that?
I am, actually, yeah. So I dabble in a number of different projects. Like at the end of the day, I usually call myself like a multidisciplinary artist, educator, and researcher. So right now I'm in a master's program at First Nations University of Canada in Indigenous education, and I'm guessing my pathway is about addressing the health and wellness as it has to do with our learning, and not necessarily the education system, because I'm not always a fan of it, but what learning and healing looks like as we go through the life cycles and the life journey, and is specifically looking at our unique history as Indigenous people and as settler people coming together in the land. So yeah, that's.
Are you on your motorbike?
No, I live downtown, so it's, yeah.
You're just driving around doing this interview.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's so loud. But yeah, I live right downtown, so that's the way it goes. Yeah, so anyways, I am doing that in sort of academic work. And yeah, I'm currently hosting a television show called The Other Side, looking at Indigenous spirituality and paranormal worlds. Yeah, so that's really interesting work as well, and a lot of it has to do with healing and looking at our different cultures and different worldviews around the spirit realm. So that's been really really fun, really interesting, and thought-provoking. So I do that, and I'm also working on some other projects too. Another TV show, which I can't speak too much about, but essentially, looking at treaty and the implications of that, and what that means to my people, and the importance of it in this day and age, and why it's so integral to our future health, essentially, as nations.
So that one's in the works?
Yes. Yeah, it is in the works.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you have any good ghost stories about your paranormal one?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. There's a lot. I mean,
We'll just have to watch.
I was gonna say there's a lot. There's some spooky stuff for sure. Some really unnerving stuff. We'll have to do another podcast some of the time.
I know you posted some. I think you were doing Facebook Live on Halloween or something?
Oh, yeah. We did a live episode.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I'm totally down for the paranormal and to mix it in with your culture and traditions and stuff. That's a really cool idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and it's its own niche, I guess.
Thank you so much, Erin. I can't thank you enough, because that was amazing. I mean, I know we could have talked for another 2 hours, or I could have listened anyway for another couple more hours. I really, really do appreciate you taking your time and being vulnerable and sharing your story, as I do all my guests. But yeah, thank you very much. Next week, I have another young lady who's being very vulnerable. Her name is Heather Ashton, and she is a psych nurse at the General Hospital in Regina. And what makes her story interesting is she was once a client on the psych ward, or a patient, whatever you want to call it. She also has a brother that's fought with some mental health struggles and has been on the psych ward in the past as well. So it's kind of an interesting story from being a patient to now being someone that works there and is helping other patients. So listen to that. It's a really great story. She's another really great young lady, and just a passionate, lovely lady. So that'll be next week. And, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I can promise you I've got some really great episodes coming up in the next weeks to come. Yeah, I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, I've got a lot of great guests lined up. So keep on listening, and thank you for people that have been listening from the very beginning, and thank you people that maybe this is your first time listening. It's just a lot of fun doing this, and I really appreciate that you appreciate it. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review however you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a moment, and it really helps the show out with getting noticed. This episode has been sponsored by Penny University Bookstore, 3104 13th Avenue. Call 639-571-2186 and check out their online bookstore at pennyu.ca. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Wellness, however you define it, is achievable. You don't even need to figure it all out by yourself. Talk to Connexus. They'll give you guidance, motivation, and the push you need to reach your goals. They've got you. They're your financial partner, and they know you can achieve your very best, your financial best. Prove them right. Start right at Connexus Credit Union. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also sponsored by Direct West. Are you a business owner looking for new avenues to promote your business? Direct West digital billboards are a great opportunity to highlight a new product, new promotion, or anything else you'd like your customers to know about. You can get local, expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian Crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Renabaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.